Hello and welcome to our message to the Black man. We have been doing our March Madness Men's Revival for the last decade. Last year was the first time that we were unable to have it since I've been in Pittsburgh, but we did not want to miss another opportunity for us to place Black men in leadership before you. So we're doing it this year virtually. So I want to welcome each and every one of you to our March Madness Men's Revival 2021. I am really excited about this roundtable. I've entitled this roundtable Message to the Black Man. And I have some powerful men that are going to be able to come and to share with you today. We have Dr. Anthony B. Mitchell, Dr. Michael Quigley, Brother Malcolm Thomas, and Brother Keith Murphy. These are some men who have worked at the community level and the institutional level to make life better for African-American men and boys, and men and boys of color. So we are really excited to have each and every one of them with us today. I am Dr. Darrell Trevino Kennedy, and I am the senior pastor of the Rodman Street Church in the city of Pittsburgh and virtually around the world. I am also the founder of the Life Male Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Math Academy. It is the only K-12 male academy intentionally recruiting Black males into the STEM fields. We know that STEM is the jobs of the future. So we want you to know that today we are going to celebrate Black male leadership. I want to allow these brothers to introduce themselves to you today as they introduce themselves and their organization and their experience with working with Black men and boys. We're going to begin with Dr. Anthony B. Mitchell.
Good morning, Dr. Kennedy. And also good morning to my brothers. First, Dr. Kennedy, most people call me Brother Tony, and I feel very comfortable with you calling me Brother Tony. A little bit about my background, and I will be brief. I'm an educator. I'm a professor of African American Studies at Penn State University. I would say that I have decades of experience working at the grassroots level in our neighborhoods and communities around Pittsburgh. Most importantly, I'm the husband of a beautiful wife of nearly 39 years soon. I'm the father of twin sons, and very proud of the family aspect of my life. And I think that's something that has influenced the work that I've done with young men and men over the years. So I'm very, very happy to be here today at the university. In 2010, my colleague and I, Dr. Jonathan White, we founded a program for incoming first-year males of color. The program is called the Stewart and Jones Scholar Leadership Program, and this program is designed to increase the success and the matriculation to graduation of first and second year African-American males at Penn State, as well as also providing them support for the cultural environment and challenges they face at Penn State. So I'm very happy to be here today, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Michael Quigley.
Dr. Kennedy, my brothers on this call, I'm honored to be here. As Brother Tony said, I prefer Brother Mike. I think that we're all a part of a community without hierarchies, and we want to be able to acknowledge each other in that way as brothers on this call. I'm a professor of organizational leadership at Robert Morris University currently. I'm a K-12 educator in my previous professional life. I spent 14 years as a social studies teacher, 13 of those in Pittsburgh Public Schools, 1 year in the Fairfax County Schools. I also work in the community with several community-based organizations that have a focus on mentoring. My my current work at Robert Morris focuses in on, of course, as a faculty member teaching leadership, but I also, as a member of the 100 Black Men, am the advisor for the Collegiate 100, which is the collegiate arm of the 100 Black Men. And of course, the 100 Black Men's focus on mentoring, education, health and wellness, and of course, financial literacy. We do all of those same things with the young folks, the college students at Robert Morris that are a part of our program. I've had the opportunity also to serve as the director for the Black Male Leadership Development Institute with my colleagues and brothers, Brother Tony and Brother Malcolm. And during that time, of course, we worked together for the young men in this region who we served. And that program focused primarily on adolescent Black males, high school age. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'll turn it over to my brother Malcolm.
Peace, brothers. Thank you. Can you hear me? All right. My name is Malcolm Thomas. People in the community know me as Brother Malcolm. People who know me in the community know me as Brother Minikek. So a lot of people know me as those. If you hear any of those, that's me. I have been working in education and activism in the community all of my adult life. After graduating from Penn State, I came back and several of my sister's peers, one of her boyfriends was murdered. And I decided I wanted to get into the schools to work with young people. My first jobs were working with the Hill House. I was also there with my family member, Brother Tony and Dr. Mitchell. So we were at the Hill House, the Young Fathers Program, and went on to work with the National Council for Urban Peace and Justice, and then went to work with Brother Fred Brown at the Mother to Son program as program coordinator there, and then to Mercy. So I worked in mental health for 10 years, actually, at Mercy. And then went to start my own organization, Reaching Back, and am the executive director of that at this time. I've worked with all these gentlemen in various capacities over the last 10 to 20 years of my life, and even 30 years in some cases, and have learned from each of them. I currently work with training teachers in various districts, with running programs in and around the Pittsburgh Public Schools, and also work with a program that we're developing called the Manhood Maximizer Program, which is designed to optimize male leadership and healing around some concepts that we really developed in preparation for our trip to Ghana back in 2014 and 13 with Brother Murphy, myself, and Dr. Mitchell, as well as our elders and some young brothers. That was really transformative for me and has really accelerated my need to look at the idea of the warrior healer, a concept that was first articulated by Brother Murphy, actually. He said that at a meeting, and it just electrified my whole being. So I'm thankful to be on the call and to be here with you all.
Good, thank you. Brother Murphy.
Some people call me Tugby, the Nuno Akbali the first. I was installed in Ghana, West Africa, in a village called Blekusu, outside the Keta region and in the Volta region. I've been blessed to serve in the capacity over the past 28 years of serving nothing but people of African descent. There has nothing been more pleasurable, even though it wasn't always a pain type of situation, but nonetheless, the dedication to developing and transforming young minds and young adults, as well as adults. I am the founder and executive director of an institution called the Healthy Village Learning Institute. Being born and raised in McKeesport, I found myself with an opportunity to purchase a school building in the city of McKeesport, and have transformed it into a cultural piece that I hope resonates throughout this country, but certainly definitely in this region. So given that history of just focusing on people of African descent, I've just been blessed. But our goal is not just ending with me. So when we talk about 5-10-year plans in our institution, we talk about 500-year plans. How do we succeed for the next 500 years? A lot of folks question that. They say, well, how you pick 500 years? I say they hit 500 years of slavery. So certainly we can have 500 years of advancement. So I'm looking forward to getting engaged in this conversation because this isn't about me and it never will be. So let me turn it over to you to get your program started.
Well, thank you so much, brothers. And thank all of you for joining us. I want to ask the question, what is the state of Black men and boys in the United States today? And you can go in any order you want to talk.
To stop the pause. So the state currently, when we look at the dynamics of all the racialized things that are happening throughout this country, there are certain things that are occurring. One, Black men, Black boys don't have the confidence to walk out their house without the fear of knowing that they might get killed. How do we build the confidence for us to say we will be empowered to the state that when we walk out, not only will we feel protected, but we'll be willing to protect others? We have turned into a videotape generation. How we can sit and watch our people get murdered on videotape and no one jumps in. Even when we got numbers, we have got to find ways to protect our people regardless of that authoritative thing that's happening with those police, right? So the state has to be, we have to rebuild our confidence to the level, you know, when you think about the Deacons of Defense, when you think about even the Black Panther Party movement, you talk about all those folks out there in the movements that said we are going to protect our community. That is something we've lost. Now it turns out we'll protect me and you got to fend for yourself. So when Tupac said, you got to get yours, I got to get mine, that resonated among some young folks to the level to say, look, I just got to get what I got to get. I got to do what I got to do. So the communal part, so when I think about how I named a healthy village, you know, you've heard the adage, it takes a village to raise a child. Yeah, but what if the village ain't healthy? So now you have an unhealthy situation. So the state of Black men and state of Black boys is how do we restore that healthiness that says that adults like us, the elders of the community, we have to be a voice. We have to be a movement. We have to inspire those other younger brothers to become engaged in that process of protecting. So I think we have to get back to that process of identifying what our true role should be, not what it is, but what it should be. But how do we get there?
Brother Keith, I'd like to piggyback on what you just said. The African proverb, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm, comes to mind right now. And I don't know if this is the direction that everyone wants to go in this conversation, but I want to be able to articulate the importance of the existence of the Ma'afa experience, of menticide, of psychological slavery, or post-traumatic slave syndrome, as Dr. Joy DeGroy-Leary puts it. We have to be thinking about how we have devolved as a people to the point where the sense of community has been lost, to your point. I think about, again, the notion of Ubuntu that we've learned from Desmond Tutu and of course, Nelson Mandela and the healing that took place in South Africa. The concept, and I remember the first time that I heard this was from Brother Malcolm. The idea of Ubuntu is that I am because we are, and because we are, I am. So I think about the state of Black men, Black boys in America being one of individualism, being one of hedonistic indulgence, being one of thinking more about the self than the community. And that's more troubling than anything else. Now, of course, we have all of these things that are going on with police brutality, with the murders of unarmed, Black men. Of course, with the 8 minutes and 46 seconds of Derek Chauvin putting his knee on Brother George's neck, and that public lynching has brought to the fore something that we've known for centuries, right? But what have we done to support healing so that we will not allow those kinds of things to happen? So I'm thankful to be in this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to talk about this, to work this through, to come up with some solutions in an ongoing way. But I'm really concerned about the lack of community that is allowing these things to happen over and over and over again.
Just to also weigh in on that, I believe that conversation has to start with our culture in terms of, I think one of the greatest things that has happened to us as a people is we've absorbed other people's cultural standards. And we don't have to look outside of ourselves for cultural standards. There are certain things that I began to think of. One of my first jobs was at the Hill House. And then I worked with brothers who were into a lot of violence. And I remember the brothers lived by these street codes. Everything was by certain these codes, but these codes didn't really come from us. These codes are codes that are Western codes that we assimilated, and you think they come from people in our community. Just the way that we handle conflict, the way that we deal with women, the way that we relate to each other, the way that we problem solve, the way that we handle stress, the way that we persevere through difficulty. What is our response to a given infraction or transgression? These are not really from our culture. And so I remember having a conversation again. I had a conversation with Quig about this when he was at Oliver. I had a conversation with Murph about this. Tugby and I talked about this. We were talking about codes. Remember that, Tugby? We were talking about how we don't have codes that we live by. And I had been thinking about this since '99. And me and Brother Tony would talk about this as well. Like, how do we function in terms of with our women? And so I think that one of the things that we came up with is we had to have virtues. We had to have a certain cultural ideas that we go back and look at how do we do things and how do we put together processes that help to assimilate these things and make an oath that this is what we're going to live by. And I give my brothers the right to check me and step to me and to assist me with living these standards. And we ceremonialize this in our culture because we've done these things with boys. And I've seen the brothers who are still living by certain codes. Even though they're in the midst of another environment, it's possible to appeal to the part of our boys that I don't think want to live this way. I don't think that they know deep down, because there's a spirit of divinity and culture and Africanity in them. They know that there's something that's wrong with codes that do not promote life, health, harmony, and unity. That's not natural. And I think we have to appeal to the fact that there's something divine, there's something that knows the truth in our children, and that the things that we see in them are things that they themselves sense and feel is not of their true nature. And we have seen over and over, all these brothers have seen that when you present these things to our young men, they will gravitate toward it if you're living it, if you're attempting to embody it, and you're doing it with patience and love, and trying to bring them into the assembly of other men. We say to be a man, you must see a man. So you have to see these things so that we don't think that that's being weak, that's being soft, that's being something other than a strong but committed and principled Black man. So I just want to say that I think that we have to get back to our own standards, our own codes, and our own virtues, which are embedded in our own culture.
I would agree with everything that's been said. From a historical perspective, as Brother Murphy said, Tugby, we have been attacked, Black men. The Black boy, the Black body has been attacked for the past 500 years, actually longer when you study African history. And we are at a very vulnerable state. We're probably at the weakest state that we have been in as a people. We have lost contact with the wisdom of our ancestors and the development of the resiliencies that they were able to use to survive slavery. And so we need to recover Sankofa. We need to recover the consciousness of what it means to be an African descendant. We need to recover our sense of communalism. We need to recover our sense of collective identity and awareness of what it means to say that I am a man, that I am a Black man, that I am an African. And K through 12 systems in America do not do that. We must do that. That must be done at the community level. That must be done by men and women who know who they are and understand our potential for greatness and the divinity that is in us as a people.
Wow, I mean that brings up a lot of thoughts, because if we don't see what we can become, oftentimes our young men fall into the wrong hands. What are your thoughts on how we can empower then healthy racial identity to be proud of who you are and manhood development for Black men and boys?
So identity is ground zero for me. If you can't attach land, history, and culture to your identity, it's like I tell folks, in the past 60 years, we've been assigned a name. We've been colored, we've been Negro, we've been Black, we've been Afro-American, named after even hairdos, African-American, which came up in 1987. And I'm saying to brothers, look, if you African-American now, and I was born in 1962, what am I? So we have got to figure out the origin. So when you ask European people, white folks, what they are, they say, I'm Italian, I'm Polish, I'm German. They don't put American at the end. What they do is they always attach their land, history, and culture to what they are. So when we say we African, a lot of folks say, no, we ain't African, but at least they conceded to being an African-American. So I say, okay, let's compromise. You can be an American African. But if you don't understand culture, the origins of where you come from, we've had the foundations of our moral codes. We've accepted them from some other folk now, or we haven't accepted them at all. So what I'm saying is identity serves at the foundation of everything, because if you are not confident in who you are, what you are, and where you came from, you can't move forward. So when Tugby said Sankofa, this room is called Sankofa. It starts with the enslavement of our people, but goes all the way to the civil rights and the Black Panther Party movement as a circular. But where do we go from here? So when we look at all of the weapons of mass destruction that they put on us with the whip, the gun, and all that other stuff, I say, how did we survive this?
That's right.
And yet we still killing each other.
That's right.
That's that's a pathological process that has been embedded because they have no identity. So when they drop that N-bomb on us, and all of a sudden we drop the N-bomb on us, and then they say, well, Tupac said nigga means never ignorant, getting goals accomplished. I said, that's about as insane as it gets. You cannot redefine things and try to make it plausible. So they say, well, that's a term of endearment. I say, okay, if that brother wrongs you, what you gonna say? You either love that N or you hate that, or you gonna kill that N. You can't have it both ways, but part of it is the confusion of identity. So I think if we get down to the crux of helping them appreciate African history, tradition, culture, now they have a different appreciation for life. And then you can, of course, go to Ma'at with the truth, justice, righteousness, propriety, harmony, balance, and order as a practicing moral code versus just saying Kwanzaa and only practice that thing 7 days a week. 7 days out the year. So I'm just saying we have got to get back to the real restorative stuff that helps us become better men and family members.
When I was in the classroom teaching African American history, with Brother Malcolm working in the manhood development program, one of the things that seemed to be really troubling for me was how difficult it was oftentimes to get the young folks, the students, to really invest into this learning. And I'm thinking, about the concepts that I brought up a little bit earlier about menticide and the Ma'af experience and psychological slavery and those kinds of things. Because unfortunately, our youth have been socially engineered to reject their past. So when I think about this idea of Sankofa, one must return to the past in order to move forward. We have to be able to have folks in the classrooms, which are the most critical touch points for for our young folks. We work with them in communities, we work with them in after school programs, but the critical touch points for the most part with our young folks are in the classroom and in their homes. So how can we help them to develop that positive racial identity? How can we help them to kind of unpack and peel back the layers of all of the structural racism, all of the other things that are going on right now, so they can see clearly? We have to be able to develop our own critical race consciousness as educators, so that the young folks can develop their critical race consciousness, so that they can be the chief architects of their success, as opposed to being, part of their, contributors to their own demise. So to the question about what can we do? Well, we have to have more Black men in particular, but educators in general, that have their developed critical race consciousness, so that we can help our young folks develop the kind of critical race consciousness that are going to be necessary for us to have 500 years of advancement, like Brother Keith said, as opposed to more of the same of what we've experienced in this country for the last 500 years.
With my response, I'm going to set up Brother Malcolm and Tugby. Rite of passage. Rite of passage. Rite of passage. We have to recognize, as Brother Quigley said, that our youth today have been socially engineered. They have been miseducated. They have been made to think that anything African is not what they represent. And that is very much the condition of miseducation that Dr. Carter G. Woodson spoke about in 1933. And we have to recognize that the solutions are right in front of us, that we are the solution. Those of us who have this awareness and consciousness, but also who have done this work with our youth, with our people on a variety of different levels, know that rite of passage can instill positive socialization, positive identity, positive character, healthy awareness and understanding of what it means to say that I am a Black man, that I am an African. Also teaching them how to become men who will protect their wives, their children, their families, their communities, and the nation. This is something that I believe is not easily done at the K through 12 level. It can be done at the community level. It can be done in school systems where the teachers look like us and understand how to reach our children on a spiritual level. Because fundamentally, what we're really talking about, Dr. Kennedy, is spiritual warfare. And until we understand that fundamentally it is spiritual warfare, it'll be difficult for some of our people to recognize that we are the solution. We are the us that we have been waiting for.
Yes, I'll just say that everything that has been said is right on the nail for me. What we talk about a lot is culture and identity, and how that and goes from content to process. How we have processes that we get back to in our community, and I, had to come to a conclusion, and this is a difficult thing maybe for some people to hear, but the world that we live in is an experiment. It's someone's idea of the world. When you really think about it, it's someone's idea of education. It's someone's idea of what a relationship should look like. It's someone's idea of what government should be. It's someone's idea of what love is. Someone's idea of what success is. So, failure begins with wanting the wrong things. And a lot of times what we've done is we've set up, first of all, a false sense of what success really is for our young people. And then we have not shown them how their own culture and their own identity leads to real empowerment, because even kids respect power. So we have to show them that there's a certain way that you live, and there's a certain way that our people lived and can live to wield power and to change the world into the image and interests of ourselves. Is this the world that you would have created? If you had it to do all over, is this the world that you would have created? I asked the kids that, the brothers that. And if it isn't, we have to start by understanding that this isn't just the real world. This is someone's idea of the world. And we have to show them how certain things lead to sovereignty and power. And I think that has to come with having institutional control. When you don't run your own institutions, your children ultimately do not respect some of the things that you offer them because they feel like you have not been able to use it to gain control over certain spheres of influence in the world. You're still working for someone, we're still under someone else's dominion ultimately, right? So, when I look at what Tugby's doing, he has his own building. What happened with me is when COVID hit, I was working in someone else's building. So I no longer had guess what? A place to work. Isn't that something? I was like the mayor there until COVID hit, and then there was no space because it wasn't my space. And I learned quickly that if you don't own your own real estate and have control of your own institutions, that your children still will see you as someone who has to get someone else's consent to be able to practice what you were preaching. And so I think we have to always tie our identity to establishing sovereignty and power in the world and showing them how these processes lead to that, and controlling spaces where if we did it our way, this is what we did, right? Now let's compare, because we can articulate a great critique of the schools and stuff from having our own school. I believe it's at least as cogent when you have your own school and say, this is how we're doing it. This is how we got these results. That's what Marva Collins did. This is how we got these results. This was our approach. Now you can compare it to your approach, because she was seen, people don't talk about that, she was seen as crazy when she started that school. She was opposed, she was talked about, she was ridiculed, she was laughed at. I'm just using one example. But then once her students began performing, they're like, well, how do we learn to do what you're doing? So I think we have to get back to doing it our way, but we have to be able to do it through our own institutional control as well, because our children still will not see themselves as sovereign beings who can step proudly into their culture if we still cannot use it to assert ourselves in the world, in my opinion.
Dr. Kennedy, you're muted.
Thank you. We got to be very intentional about what we do. And we cannot apologize for being who we are as Black men. And so many times we try to sugarcoat it or what have you, but I've been a Black man for 56 years. I'm not going to turn white tomorrow or anything else. And I got to be proud of who I am. The enemy knows that if he can destroy the male, he can destroy the entire race. When you look at our brother Moses, when Moses was born, Pharaoh said, kill all the male children and let the girls live. When Jesus was born, Herod said, kill all the boys that are 3 years and younger. The enemy knows that if he can destroy the male, he can destroy the entire family. He can destroy the entire race. So I'm very intentional on trying to help Black men to see our role as priest, protector, and provider. We got to see our role. And we've been emasculated in the media. We've been emasculated in classrooms and so on and so forth. And so we got to do something ourselves to try to help to level this playing field. He who starts the race behind will always be behind unless you run faster than the person in front of you. So what are some ways that we can do to start leveling this playing field, brothers?
So I believe it all starts with expectation. Somehow or another, we've been led to believe that we shouldn't expect our kids to engage in excellence. So when we talk about the alchemical process of transformation to perfectibility, how do we perfect our young brothers and how do we get them to buy into that idea? We have not. So when you look at the school systems, they don't have high expectations for young Black men and young Black boys, or they would have never came up with that concept of the pipeline from school to prison, right? Mm-hmm. We have got to, so when we grew up, we had parents that it wasn't a question of where you going to college, it was where you was going to college. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a question of whether or not you was going to engage in some real productive stuff for your life, or you was just going to be lazy, smoke weed, drink beer, and play video games all day. We have got to raise expectation. We got to be able to look a young brother in the eye and say, hey, brother, what do you love most? And when they say what it is, how do we nurture that and say, okay, but we need to strengthen up all this other stuff so that you can become successful. I know you don't see any relevance in taking algebra and what does it have in terms of life preparation. Look, brother, all I'm saying is you got to be analytical and think critically, but you got to be good at everything. We got to raise our expectation. We can't. So when young boys walk by me with their pants down and say, young man, why don't you pull your pants up? And he looks at me like I'm an alien. And I'm saying, look, brother, I know you don't know me, but I'm just saying, if I wanted to respect you the way I want you to pull your pants up, man. Because I don't want nobody looking at you different. Because if they look at you and say he's sloppy, now they have low expectation for what you are, who you are, and what you possibly can become. So when we raise that level of expectation, so as brother Menikek said, you know, I've been blessed to own my own facility. So we get to dictate the terms. So when African brothers and sisters walk in here, they take ownership of this. This ain't mine, this is ours. So I want everybody to say, this is ours. So, but when you see from one floor to the next floor, to the next floor, to the next floor, all the African identity and supportive processes, you can't help but to feel proud. But let me say to you, brother, if there's anything I can do for you to move your stuff along, you let me know. I'm with you.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe wholeheartedly in raising their level of expectation. The name of the school is LIFE, and it stands for Living Intelligently, Fulfilling Expectations. When you raise that expectation level up, everything changes. I went to Morehouse College. I was a senior in high school. I was number 12 in my class in Jacksonville, Florida. And I didn't think I can go to college. I had never seen anybody in my family go. One day I was walking down the hall. It was an African-American guidance counselor. He was not even my counselor. He said, hey, Kennedy, what college you going to, boy? I said, man, I ain't going to college. He said, why not? I said, I don't even know. He said, get you in my office. You know, back then, back in the early 80s, they taught the any kind, get you in my office. So I went to his office and he said, boy, why you not talking about going to college? You the top African-American student at this school. Why you not going to college? I said, I don't even know how to fill out the paperwork. That man told me about Morehouse College. I had never heard. I'm one state away. I'm right in Jacksonville. Never heard of Morehouse College. And that's the only school that I applied to. And when I got to that school, just seeing people who look like me walking around, I saw Daddy King. He walking around, Benjamin Elijah Mays walking around that campus, Oprah, Bill Cosby, seeing Spike Lee, Samuel L. Jackson. I play football. They up in the stands. We ain't win all the game, but they up in the stands cheering me on. But I saw what I could become. And when I moved to this city 11 years ago, I just don't see that. So God said to me, you got to save the boys. If you can save the boys, if you can help them to raise their level of expectation, their identity and who they really are as kings, you can begin to move the needle of what's going on. People ask me all the time, you a Florida boy, man, all that snow up there? I said, I've been called to this city. When you've been called someone, I didn't grow up saying, oh, I want to live in Pittsburgh. No, I didn't grow up saying that. But I know that I've been called to this city to do what we are doing right now. And with brothers like you, we got to change the needle. We got to turn it around at the community level to help our young men to see themselves as kings. At this school, every boy is Mr. Murphy, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Quigley, Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Kennedy. Every boy, I don't care what you call in the neighborhood, you are king. You are royal. You are Mr. And that's when you begin to change that mindset. And that's what we got to do. I believe we got to change the mindset of who our young men and older men are and who they've been created to be.
I would like to also say that I agree with everything that's been said. And I think that when you look back in history, you know, one of the things that I think sometimes we overlook is that when you get back into processes, passage processes, institution building, having schools, it didn't start with boys. It starts with a committed group of men. It starts with men who make a covenant with each other that we're going to do this together. We're going to, because a lot of times we're introducing ourselves, our boys, into a society that we haven't created, into a brotherhood that doesn't even exist in some cases. You know, I had to check some of the brothers I was working with about things they were doing that went counter to the values in the program. I don't want to get into it specifically, but I had to pull them aside and say, brother, we're promoting this. You know, the boys are looking at you. They're looking at us, you know, and we sometimes, because we're adults, we come to the conclusion that we already have it together. We already are here. And for the most part, you know, among brothers like the ones among that I'm among today, that is the case. But a lot of brothers don't necessarily and have not necessarily come to that place where they've made a covenant with other men that we're going to live this way. You know, I watched Brother Tony be married for decades in a successful family. That he never had to talk to me about that. I watched that. I saw that as a teenager, watched him and Sister B be married. I saw the way he redirected my cousins. I would watch little things he would say to Dante or Anthony, because there was a certain thing as men that we have to come together and say, what are our manhood processes for the adults? What are the standards we're going to live by, even if it's 3 of us, even if it's 2 of us, right? And I believe that's sometimes the step that we skip, because every program I've been in with adults, there were certain things that we were promoting that some of the brothers who were adults were not modeling for the young people. Murph said this a couple times. Tony said it. I've heard Quick say it as well. You know, theory is great. Theory is great. You know what I mean? But practice, you know, what you do. Brothers are watching everything you do. So when we get into this work, you know, what I've made a commitment to is for the last half of my life, I'm trying to work with brothers who have been totally committed to living the highest standards and who are going to do that together. You can only do so much by yourself. And I believe that what we need to do is what we're doing here, bringing Black men together of like mind and kindred spirit, and saying, what can we do what can we do with the 5 of us as a project, as an outgrowth of this, even if it's something this big, right? So that's what I'm excited about, is being here together and convening with other Black men and raising our standards in our families, in our businesses, economically, whatever we're doing. How do we do that and support each other? Murph just came out and made a pledge to you. I'm making the same pledge. Whatever I can do to support what you're doing, to start your own school, I believe every one of us needs to go out and support what Murph is doing. Go see his facility. So how do we support things that are already in existence, right? As opposed to doing something new, how do we support that which has already been done and to strengthen that?
We come from the old school mentality that I could show you better than I can tell you, and it stands to reason that, you know, we as kindred spirits on this call would be men who would be committed to walking the walk as well as talking the talk. But we don't have any shortage of Black leaders that are continuing to perpetuate injustice and are hostile to our children's very existence, that are in places of leadership and authority in institutions. So in addition to us building our own institutions where we make the call, where we have ownership, where we can say like Marva Collins, this is how we do it, we also need to help to develop the capacity to disrupt and interrupt those systems that are Black led that are harming our children. And I think that's a part of this conversation as well. Now, Brother Tony and I want to point to an article that he and I wrote back in 2018, and you can find it on the online Journal of African American Males in Education. The article is in, to point you directly to it, Volume 9, Issue 2, What Works? Applying Critical Race Praxis to the Design of Educational and Mentoring Interventions for African American Males. We're talking about in this the ways in which committed educators, Black men in particular, but committed educators in general, can again embody that critical race consciousness to help our young folks, our young men in particular, to develop the kind of critical race consciousness so that they can interrupt and disrupt institutions and environments that are hostile to their very existence. They can develop the toolkits and the competencies and the strategies to be able to avoid the cradle to prison pipeline, to be able to get themselves into a situation where they, if they choose to do so, they can not only make it to college, but they can thrive in college. These are the kind of things that I think that we, as men who understand and recognize the needs in these educational spaces, can provide the kind of mentoring and the kind of leadership that our young folks need. So I believe that we need to build our own institutions, but I also think that we need to be able to disrupt and interrupt these hostile institutions that our young folks are in.
I really appreciate that, Brother Michael. I know our time is going to run short, and I know that you're going to be showing this to men doing your ministry. So I want to ask a question in relationship to expectations, in relationship to intentionality, in relationship to a covenant, to our brothers, to the men. As men, do we believe that white teachers and white school systems can liberate our children, can liberate our sons? Or do we believe that we can create those systems? You're doing it, Dr. Kennedy. Brother Murphy's doing it. Brother Minikek is doing it. Brother Quigley is doing it. All of us have worked together. The only way we're going to achieve the vision that we seek for our children, we're going to have to do it. And we're going to have to do it together. If we want to create the warrior leader, if we want to return our men to the kings that they are, then we're going to have to do that. We're talking about miseducation, but we're also talking about disrupting a school system that doesn't love our children. We're talking about disrupting a school system where most of those teachers do not see greatness in our children. As men, we must take it upon ourselves to restore not only greatness to our people, we must restore greatness to the brotherhood that we must share with one another. And I think that's what Brother Minikek was speaking about when he talked about a covenant. We have all formed a covenant with each other to do this work. And you have my commitment as well in the vision that you have brought to Pittsburgh.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Absolutely. One of the things I think that Brother Tony and Brother Mike wrote about is single gender education. Let's talk about a little bit about that. Single gender school for males. Do you think this approach could be helpful in optimizing the achievement of Black males?
Let me go first, and I'll turn it over to you, Brother Mike. In 2010, my colleague, Dr. James Stewart, in looking at the national movement towards single gender schools for Black boys, we surveyed 33 educators from across the United States on the benefits of single gender education. All 33 of our respondents said yes, that single gender schools provide a powerful foundation to implement African-centered education, to implement liberational education, to implement rites of passage. So unless we recognize that we have this power to do this, and single gender education in schools provide us the opportunity to do this, then we will miss the mark. This is what Carter G. Woodson said in 1933, how we have missed the mark. We haven't taken control of the education of our children. Single gender schooling allows us to do that.
Yeah, I want to say that I think that, some of the main arguments against single gender schooling neglect the fact that even for women, schools where women are put into a single gender environment, they tend to perform better because there are certain needs that women have that are not met in the same way in schools that are not single gender. There's certain conversations, there are certain processes that need to occur in a single gender space, for healing to occur, for candor to occur, for accountability to occur, for a sense of cohesiveness, because we don't really have, I don't think, a real good male-female dynamic until the brotherhood is strengthened and the sisterhood can be strengthened. And I think that has to happen in separate spaces and oftentimes. And then we come together. We always bring the community back together, but I think certain processes need to occur in separate spaces. Certain work is men's work. Certain work is women's work. And because the Western education doesn't have a foundation of character as its development, it's just the information acquisition, right? I know something because I can quote it, not I know something because I am able to have a change in my behavior or my moral conduct. There's no real connection to knowing and character and identity, right? So identity is formed a lot of times in single gender spaces, I believe, in a way that it cannot always be. And when you look at a school like a Morehouse, like a Spelman, like even some of the affluent white schools, you'll see that being proven, I think, time and time again.
So my experience in traveling around the country, looking at single sex, all male institutions, especially the ones that dealt with African children, there were some cases where I walked in classrooms and there was a white man teaching African history. And then when I walked into the English class, it's focused more on European. And I'm saying, look, it's a great strategy of having us together, because having brothers supporting brothers is a powerful thing. But if you're giving them Frankenstein mentality type stuff, all you are becoming is a all black European model that's going to do the bidding. And I'm saying, look, we have got to develop a different model that doesn't say, hey, look, we want you to just go to college and then come out and work for somebody. How do we create that apparatus that says, when you come out, you go into your community, you're gonna build some stuff, you're gonna make some things happen. We have got to, so content and intent, those things have to mesh. And if we don't have a cultural component that puts those young men in a space that says, I'm a proud African brother and I'm gonna do some proud things for my community, my family, my school, and myself. Cool. But if you just gonna do the caricature stuff, then it don't matter what type of academy you got. It's like when I see the brothers in Chicago dressed up in bow ties and everything, and that's cool. But the question becomes, how much were they culturally aligned with saying, we in Chicago, which probably has the worst murder rate in the country. Right. What are you doing out there, or are you protected? Or are you an elitist of this crew? So we can promote and say, yeah, 99% of them brothers go to college. Yeah, but how many of them brothers go back to the community and say, brother, I'm gonna help you with your math, I'm gonna help you with your reading, I'm gonna help you with your science, but I'm gonna help you understand we got to love each other.
Brother Keith, thank you. That's exactly what I was about to say. It's not just about the who, it's about the what. What is being taught to our young folks in these single gender schools? We don't want to send out into the world more black capitalists. We don't want to send out more brothers into the world who are more concerned with moving up and out like the Jeffersons than to think about their community. So it's not just about the who. We single gender schools with brothers that are teaching, that's absolutely perfect. But we need to be supplying the right content, supplying the right experiences, supplying the right mentoring and activities for these young men to become contributors to our advancement, to your point, Brother Keith, for 500 years.
The content should be African-centered and should include African rite of passage. Or we'll miss the mark.
And that rite of passage piece has to be very intentional in terms of making sure you meet certain measured goals. It's not always a physical thing. For me, it's a mental thing. How do you transform a previous you into a better you? If we can't move that needle, It's not rites of passage. It's just a program. So it's like I tell brothers and sisters, if you engage in rites and passage, it's a process. It's a lifetime. So every child, every young man that comes through my rites of passage, he's in rites of passage until I'm gone, until he becomes an ancestor and gets promoted to being an elder and all that other stuff. So we have to lay out the foundations of each stage of what those passages are. Because a lot of people, you know, I remember talking to Tugby Tony, he said, man, people were spelling rights, R-I-G-H-T-S. And I'm like, is that right? So again, there are people who find it advantage in getting resources, money from foundations, but don't understand any of the principles designed for African rites of passage. But it's a very important component on every level.
Wow. Well, brothers, in our last few moments, I want each of you to give a closing clarion call to Black men and boys. A closing clarion call to Black men and boys.
I'm just going to start by saying very simply that there's nothing that is in front of us. There's nothing that is wrong with us that can't be fixed by what's right with us. But success is a team sport, and we cannot do this by ourselves. So there's nothing that's wrong with us that can't be fixed by what's right with us. And we need each other. That's all I have to say. Because we're here for this, and we can do something about every single thing that's going on.
Brother Malcolm, I'll go next. I remember you saying that as I interviewed you for my dissertation, brother. I love that. I love that. Again, another African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think about the importance of us remaining connected, supporting Brother Dr. Reverend Kennedy in his new school, supporting Brother Keith in his African-centered institution, supporting one another in our work in various domains toward a collective goal of success. I love that idea 500 years from now. What are we going to look like? What do we want this world to be? What can we imagine this world to look like for us, our people, for humanity? I think about in terms of education and Brother Tony, you've mentioned Dr. Carter G. Woodson several times in terms of what he called for back in 1933, which was a carefully directed education. And his direct quote from our paper, sir, "The oppressor, however, raises his voice to the contrary. He teaches the Negro that he has no worthwhile past, that his race has done nothing significant since the beginning of time, and that there is no evidence that he ever will achieve anything great. The education of the Negro then must be carefully directed, lest the race may waste time trying to do the impossible, missing the mark. We have to return to our history in order for us to move forward in the spirit of Sankofa in the right direction."
And I would just simply say, we have to encourage brothers to design it. But in designing, they must first define it. So define what you want to become, what you want to do. Design it. And then I think that puts them on the path of planning, but not just that plan in the head that sometimes can be missing a week from now. Plan it, put it on paper. Then work the plan. So a lot of brothers, they keep switching channels. And I say, look, you was in this lane last week, you're in this lane this week. What lane do you want to travel? Because, you know, you've always heard that, you know, the division between two roads, either way will take you anywhere, but you just don't know where you're going. So we have to figure out, how do we put them on a pathway that makes sense, that they're dedicated to, that they're committed to? So they have to define it and design it, but then they have to implement some things. So we have to encourage the brothers to expect more, to do more.
Brothers, in the last 30 years or 40 years, every single day as a father, a community father, and all of us are fathers and community fathers. There's a scene in the first episode of Roots where after he was born, Kunta Kinte's father took him out into the darkness of the night and he held him up to the heavens and he prayed to Allah. And he said to Kunta Kinte, in the great universe, there's no force in the universe greater than you, than God Almighty. To the young brothers, know that there's no force in the universe greater than you. Know that you come from greatness. Know that greatness is your destiny. And know that you are destined to return to greatness. So I salute all of the men on this program today. I honor you, Dr. Kennedy, for having us. To my brothers who I've known and I love, we must continue to do this work. There's no force in the universe greater than Black men united.
Thank you, brothers. This has been very powerful and enlightening. For me, this is just the beginning. We need to spread this news, spread what we are doing. I want to encourage all of you brothers to become authors. You have this information inside of you, but it's not doing everybody good. You're just doing it in your own classroom. So let's look at how we can spread this around. So again, thank you for joining us today. This is our message to the Black man. We believe that if we can get these principles together and our character together, that we can begin to change what's going on in our families, in our communities, in our lives. So we thank you for joining us today. Thank you, brothers, for spending some time with me today to help us to be able to help our people. And that's what it's all about for me, being able to help our people. So thank you so much for joining us today.